Obese virgin was mocked for her size at the auction. But what the mountain man did will make you believe in true love. The sun over Cedar Creek burned hot enough to melt pride and mercy alike. Dust rose from the ground as men gathered around the wooden platform, laughing, spitting, and shouting prices like they were buying cattle, not brides. On that stage stood Temperance Whitfield, known to everyone as Tempe. 19 years old, soft, round, trembling, her golden curls stuck to her damp cheeks, her hands knotted in front of her dress. She wasn't supposed to be here, not her, not the daughter of a good woman who had once run the town bakery. But since her mother's death, her stepfather had called her nothing but a burden, a useless, heavy mouth to feed. Now he'd put her up for auction like livestock. "Come on, gentlemen," the auctioneer bellowed. "Strong, healthy girl, still pure as morning snow." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Pure, because no man would touch that. She'd flatten any bed she sleeps on. Tempe bit her lip until she tasted blood. She wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the dust beneath her feet. $50, the auctioneer shouted. Silence. 30, 20, 10? 10 cents for the hog, a man yelled, and the crowd erupted with cruel laughter. Tears blurred Tempe's vision. She whispered a prayer, not for rescue, but for the humiliation to end. And then a voice cut through the noise, deep and steady as thunder rolling down the mountains. $2,000. The crowd fell silent. Every head turned toward the man standing at the edge of the square, Jeremiah Bear Thornwood, the reclusive mountain king of Ironwood Peak. Broad-shouldered, tall, his eyes dark as mahogany and full of something no one else there possessed. Conviction. 2,000, he repeated, and not a cent less. The crowd stared, stunned, and that was how the mountain man bought back a woman's dignity with a voice that silenced cruelty and a price that turned mockery into awe. Where are you listening from tonight? The crowd still hadn't found its breath. $2,000 was more money than most of them would see in a lifetime, and Jeremiah Thornwood had just spent it on the girl they'd mocked moments earlier. Bear, that's what people called him, moved through the gawkers like a storm parting trees. Every step he took seemed to shake the wooden boards beneath his boots. Tempe stood frozen, tears drying on her cheeks. When he reached the platform, he shrugged off his heavy leather coat and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, hiding the torn fabric of her dress and the hateful stares of the crowd. "Can you walk?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to find words. "Then come with me." As he led her through the square, the same men who'd laughed now stepped aside in silence. Some lowered their eyes, others watched with shame, and when Tempe dared to glance up at her savior, she saw not a monster or a brute, but a man who looked at her without disgust, only quiet certainty. By the time they reached the edge of town, her stepfather came running after them red-faced and shouting, "You can't just take her. She's mine to sell." Bear turned slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "You sold her the moment you put her on that stage. She's mine to protect now." "Protect?" the man spat. "You'll regret wasting your money on that one." Bear's jaw flexed. There are worse ways to spend money than saving a soul. He mounted his horse and helped Tempe up behind him. As the town shrank in the distance, Tempe's tears fell again, but this time they were from something she'd forgotten she could feel. Relief. They rode for hours, winding through the forest trail that led up Ironwood Peak. The air grew cooler, cleaner. filled with the scent of pine and river water. Tempe clung to him awkwardly at first, afraid of both falling and touching him too closely, but when he noticed her shivering, he shifted his arm to steady her. "Hold on," he said. "I'm not letting you fall." His voice carried no heat, no demand, just quiet assurance. And somehow that steadiness warmed her more than the coat on her back. When they reached the mountain cabin, the sun was dipping low behind the peaks. The house stood solid and proud against the trees made of thick timber and stone. Tempe's breath caught. She had expected darkness, filth, maybe cages or cruelty. Instead, it looked like a home. Bear dismounted and helped her down gently. "You'll rest here tonight. No one will bother you." She blinked up at him. "But you paid for me. Don't I owe you something?" He met her gaze, firm and kind. "You don't owe me a damn thing." "But why would you?" He held up a hand. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not while I'm still breathing." Her throat tightened. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," he said, his eyes softening. "But I know what it's like to lose everything." That night, Tempe lay awake in a warm bed for the first time in years, the mountain air drifting through the window. In the other room, she could hear him moving quietly, chopping wood, stoking the fire, humming under his breath. And somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief, she realized something extraordinary. For the first time since her mother's death, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, mist rolled down Ironwood Peak like a living thing. Tempe woke to the crackle of firewood and the smell of coffee. Her first thought was that it must have all been a dream, no auction, no shame, no man buying her freedom. But when she opened her eyes, the cabin was real, and so was the man sitting by the hearth sharpening a knife. He looked up when she stirred. "Morning." His voice was deep, steady, the kind that made silence feel like safety instead of fear. "Morning," she whispered back, her voice still weak from tears. "Did I sleep here all night?" He nodded. "You fainted before we got to the ridge. I carried you the rest of the way." Her cheeks flushed. "You carried me?" "Couldn't let you freeze on the mountain." He poured a cup of coffee, sliding it toward her. "Drink. You need it." Tempe took it carefully, the cup warm against her trembling hands. "You don't even know me, yet you spent $2,000 and carried me halfway up a mountain." He didn't look up from the fire. "Money's worth less than peace, and I couldn't stand what they were doing to you." She watched him quietly. "You didn't buy me, did you?" "No," he said simply. "I bought your freedom." Something in her chest broke open, then a fragile, aching thing she'd held shut for years. Later that day, they rode higher into the valley to fetch supplies from an abandoned storage shed. Tempe had never seen such beauty. Waterfalls glinting through the trees, sunlight breaking through clouds like heaven itself. "You live here alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Been 5 years now." "Why?" He hesitated. "I lost my wife and son in the fever. Couldn't stand the sound of town bells after that, so I came up here." "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged. "The mountain doesn't judge. It just listens." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll like it here." Halfway back, they crossed a narrow river. The current was strong, and Tempe's horse stumbled. She let out a cry, grabbing for the reins, but before fear could swallow her, Bear was there, hand on her arm, pulling her close until both their horses steadied. "It's all right," he said. "You're safe." Her heart pounded so loudly she could hardly breathe. "I'm sorry. I've never ridden this high up before." "You're learning," he said. "That's all that matters." When they reached the cabin, she climbed down from the horse and turned to him shyly. "Thank you for not laughing." "I don't laugh at courage," he said simply. That night, rain pattered softly on the roof. Tempe sat by the fire sewing a torn shirt she'd found in his trunk. Bear watched her quietly, the lamplight catching on her golden curls. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied with a small smile, "but I want to." He leaned back in his chair. "You remind me of my wife sometimes." Tempe looked up, startled. "I do?" He nodded. "She had a gentle way of making this place feel like home. It's been cold ever since she left. Until now." Tempe's breath caught. "I didn't mean to take her place." "You haven't," he said softly, "but maybe you've reminded me what it's like to live again." As the fire burned low, she looked at him, the man everyone in town feared, the man who'd spent a fortune not for possession, but for mercy. "Bear," she whispered, "why did you do it, really?" He stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Because when I saw you standing there, I saw someone who'd forgotten her worth. I know that feeling. I couldn't let it happen again, not if I could stop it." Tempe felt tears sting her eyes. "Maybe God sent you." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe he sent you to remind me that even broken souls deserve a second chance." Outside, the rain stopped, and the moon slipped free from the clouds. The mountain breathed again, calm and still, and inside that quiet cabin, two wounded hearts began the slow, steady journey toward love. Days on Ironwood Peak passed differently than anywhere Tempe had ever lived. There were no clocks, no gossip, no cruel eyes to measure her worth. Only the steady rhythm of wind through the pines, the crackle of firewood, and the sound of Bear's boots across the cabin floor. The first morning she tried to cook breakfast, she burned the biscuits black. Embarrassed, she tried to hide them under a towel. Bear found them anyway. He took one bite, grimaced, and then smiled. "Could use a little less smoke next time." Tempe blushed. "I'm not used to mountain stoves." "You'll get the hang of it," he said, reaching for another. "You don't quit easy, I like that." As the days turned into weeks, she learned to adapt to mountain life. Bear taught her how to chop firewood. Grip lower on the handle, use your weight, not just your arms. How to milk the stubborn goat that hated everyone but him, and how to find wild herbs along the ridge. When she slipped on wet moss one afternoon, he caught her before she fell, his arm firm around her waist. For a moment, neither of them moved. His hand rested against her back, her heartbeat drummed against his chest, and the air between them changed. He cleared his throat, stepping back. "You all right?" Tempe nodded, her cheeks burning. "I think so." "Good," he said softly. "Wouldn't want you hurt." The cabin soon became theirs in spirit, if not in name. Tempe cleaned every corner until the wood shone, stitched curtains from flour sacks, and planted wildflowers in jars along the windowsills. "You've made this place beautiful," Bear said one evening, leaning against the doorframe. Tempe looked up from the table where she was mending his coat. "It's not the cabin. It's the people inside it." He smiled just a little. "Then I guess I've been lucky with who walked through my door." At night, when the cold pressed against the walls, Bear would sit by the fire reading old letters from his past, his expression unreadable. Tempe would sometimes hum softly old hymns her mother had taught her, and he'd listen, eyes closed, as if the sound itself was healing something long buried. "You've got a voice that could calm a storm," he said one night. She smiled shyly. "I used to sing in church before." "Before they broke your spirit," he finished gently. Tempe nodded, tears threatening. "They said God made me wrong." Bear leaned forward, his gaze fierce. "No, Tempe. He made you strong. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise." Her heart fluttered. No man had ever spoken to her like that, not with pity, but with reverence. The first snow came early that year. Tempe stood at the window, watching flakes drift down like feathers. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Bear came up beside her. "It's even better by the fire." He handed her a steaming mug of cider, their fingers brushing. She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw the gentleness behind the ruggedness, the kindness behind the scars. "Bear," she said softly, "do you ever get lonely up here?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I used to, not any more." The words warmed her more than the cider ever could. As winter deepened, the mountain grew harsher. Wind screamed down the slopes, and snow piled high against the cabin door. One night, a blizzard raged so violently that Bear nailed boards across the windows. Tempe helped as best she could, her hands trembling with cold. When the last board was secured, the two of them collapsed by the fire, laughing from exhaustion. "Guess we're trapped here," Bear said, his breath fogging in the air. Tempe grinned. "There are worse places to be trapped." He looked at her, the flickering firelight painting her face in gold. "Yeah," he said quietly. "There are." For a long moment, silence settled between them, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then Bear reached over, pulling the blanket from the chair and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Get some rest," he murmured. "You're safe here." Tempe hesitated, then whispered, "I know." When she finally lay down that night, the wind howled outside, but it couldn't reach her. Inside those walls there was warmth, the kind that came not from fire, but from the steady heartbeat of something she'd thought she'd never have again, belonging. By the time spring thawed the mountain passes, the name Temperance Whitfield had already spread through Cedar Creek, whispered over poker tables and saloon counters. "Did you hear? The fat girl the mountain man bought for $2,000, she's still up there?" Poor fool probably realized she's no use to him now. Or maybe he's gone soft for her. Rumors always found their way uphill, and Bear knew how fast a lie could grow. When he rode into town for supplies one afternoon, the stares followed him like vultures. But he didn't care until he overheard the sheriff speaking in hushed tones at the post office. "She's got a father still alive up north. Word is he's coming down to claim her and that money Thornwood paid." Bear's jaw tightened. "He'll find no claim here," he said, his voice quiet but dangerous. When he returned home, Tempe was humming as she baked bread, flour dusting her cheeks. She looked up when she saw his expression. "Something's wrong." He hesitated. "Do you have any family left?" Her hands froze. "Just a father," she whispered, "if you can call him that." "Why?" "He's coming," Bear said. "Says he wants to reclaim you." Her face drained of color. "No, I can't go back there." "You won't?" Bear said immediately. "Not while I'm breathing?" She turned away, trembling. "You don't understand. He'll bring the sheriff. He'll make them believe I'm his property. He always said no man would ever want me unless he paid them to." Bear crossed the room and took her hands. "Listen to me. You're no one's property, not his, not mine. You're you, and I'll stand against anyone who says otherwise." Her voice broke. But what if he takes you down with me?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only men who've faced loss can manage. "I've already been taken down once, Tempe. Didn't stay there then, won't stay there now." The next days passed in uneasy quiet. Bear kept a rifle by the door. Tempe tried to act calm, but each sound from the woods made her flinch. One morning, she found him at the edge of the property, hammering stakes into the ground. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Marking the boundary," he said, "so there's no mistake about where this home begins and ends." "Home," she repeated softly. "You mean ours?" He looked up at her, sunlight cutting through the trees and touching his scarred face. "If you'll have it, yes, ours." Tears filled her eyes. "Even after everything? The rumors? The shame?" "Let them talk," he said. "The truth doesn't need their permission." But the truth didn't stop what came next. 3 nights later, thunder rolled through the valley, not from the sky, but from the sound of horses. Tempe rushed to the window and froze. Lanterns glowed down the trail. "It's him," she whispered. Bear checked his rifle. "Stay behind me." Outside, 4 riders approached. At their head was a man who bore her same eyes, but none of her gentleness. He dismounted, face twisted with anger and greed. "Jeremiah Thornwood," he called out, "you bought something that wasn't yours." Bear stepped onto the porch. "She wasn't something, she's someone, and she's not yours to claim." "She's my blood," the man spat, "and you stole her from me." "You sold her," Bear thundered. "For humiliation and silver, I paid to free her." The man sneered. "Then I'll take that freedom back with interest." He reached for his gun. But before Bear could raise his rifle, a voice cut through the air. "Don't you dare!" Tempe cried, stepping onto the porch. Her father froze, disbelief flashing across his face. "You ungrateful girl! I'm not your property," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I'm not something to sell or shame. I'm a woman, and he's the only one who ever treated me like one." For a moment, silence hung between thunder and gunmetal. Then Bear stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers. "You heard her. Leave this mountain." The man's glare faltered. He saw the look in Bear's eyes, the calm, steady kind that belonged to men who meant every word they said. He spat into the dirt. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Bear said, "but she won't." As the riders turned back down the trail, Tempe collapsed against him, shaking. He caught her easily, whispering against her hair, "It's over now? You're free?" She looked up through tears. "You keep saying that, but you're the one who set me free." He smiled, brushing her cheek. "No, Tempe, you did that yourself." The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. The mountain seemed to hold its breath as if it knew that peace, this fragile, never lasted long. Tempe did her best to smile, baking bread, humming softly, pretending the world outside the cabin no longer existed. But Bear could see the fear behind her eyes. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew the man would come back. Men like her father never left without trying to prove they still owned what they'd lost. And he was right. Late one evening, as the sun dipped behind Ironwood Peak, the sound of hooves echoed again, slower this time, deliberate. Bear rose from the table, his expression darkening. "Stay here," he said quietly. Tempe clutched his sleeve. "Don't go out there." He gave her a faint smile. "I won't start a fight, Tempe, but I won't let one reach our door either." When he stepped outside, 3 riders waited at the edge of the clearing. Her father sat at the center, a rifle resting casually across his lap. You should have known I'd be back, the man called, voice sharp as broken glass. You think you can hide her forever? Bear's voice was calm, almost too calm. She's not hiding. She's living something you never let her do. She's my daughter. She stopped being yours the moment you sold her. The man's face twisted. You think you can take her from me? She's ruined goods. A mountain man's charity case. Bear stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Careful, he said. There's only so much a man can listen to before his patience runs dry. The man laughed bitterly. What, you'll kill me in front of her? If I have to protect her, yes. He turned in his saddle toward the cabin, voice rising. Tempe, you come out here right now. You think this animal can love you? Look at him. You'll always be nothing. The door swung open. Tempe stood framed in the light of the hearth, her hair loose, her face pale, but resolute. She stepped down the porch steps, her voice clear and trembling but fierce. You're wrong, she said. I'm not nothing, not any more. Her father blinked in shock. For years you told me no one would ever want me, she said, that I was too fat, too ugly, too worthless. But he saw something in me you never did a heart. Her father sneered. A fool's heart. He'll tire of you soon enough. Bear's voice rumbled like thunder. You said enough. Before the man could react, Bear stepped forward, grabbing the barrel of his rifle and twisting it free in one motion. You don't point a weapon at a woman on my mountain. He tossed the gun aside. You want to leave alive, you'll ride now. The man stared at him, trembling with fury, then spat into the dirt. She's no daughter of mine. Tempe met his gaze and for the first time didn't look away. You're right, she said softly. I'm not. He turned his horse and vanished into the trees. For a long moment, only the wind spoke. Then Bear turned to her, his voice quiet, steady. You did that, Tempe. You faced him. Her tears fell freely now. I couldn't have without you. He shook his head. You could have. I just gave you the space to remember who you were. She stepped closer, placing a hand against his chest. Then let me thank you the only way I know how. He caught her hand gently. You already have. And as the last light of day faded from the sky, they stood together on the mountain, two souls who had survived cruelty, finding something stronger than fear, stronger than shame. They had found love that no amount of gold could ever buy. Spring arrived like a blessing that year. The snow melted from the peaks. Wild flowers bloomed along the ridge, and the river below sang a song of renewal. The cabin that had once stood in silence now echoed with laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the warmth of two lives finally beginning to heal. Tempe hung laundry under the soft sunlight, her dress rippling in the breeze. Bear stood on the porch, sanding a piece of wood for a cradle he'd been building in secret. When she turned and saw him, she smiled that shy, radiant smile that had become his favorite sight in the world. Bear, she called, you've been working on that thing for weeks. What's it for? He looked up, wiping sawdust from his hands. Maybe it's time this house had something new in it. Something to remind us that good things can still grow. She blushed, her heart catching. A cradle? He nodded. For someday, if that's what you want. Tempe walked toward him, her eyes glistening. You've already given me everything I ever wanted, a home, respect, love. You don't have to give me more. He reached for her hand, his voice soft. I didn't give you those things, Tempe. You built them yourself. I just made sure you had the space to do it. Tears filled her eyes as she leaned into him. "I used to dream of being wanted," she whispered. "Now I know what it feels like to be cherished." Bear kissed her forehead, his voice low. "You'll always be that, my Tempe, my heart." They stood there as the sun dipped behind Ironwood Peak, the sky turning gold and rose. And for the first time, Tempe felt not just saved, but free. Stories like Bear and Tempe's remind us that true love isn't about beauty, wealth, or perfection. It's about seeing the worth in someone when the world refuses to. It's about choosing kindness over cruelty and courage over shame. If you're listening somewhere out there tonight, tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story from? Because no matter how far apart we are, stories like this unite us in one truth. Every heart deserves to be valued. Every soul deserves to be loved. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply believe that you are enough.